I know for a fact that if you want to start your own podcast, there is something that you need to be sharing with the world. Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm Lisa, if you're new here, and I host a podcast called The Elevated Podcast. I have been podcasting for over 2 years now, which is crazy. And I realized that after 70 plus episodes that I recorded, edited, produced, published myself, that I had a lot of podcasting knowledge, insights, tips, and tricks to share with beginners to help them avoid a lot of the mistakes that I made by trial and error. And so I created this podcast series, How to Start Your Own Podcast, to help those of you who want to start your own podcast, but are so intimidated by it or don't know where to start or just need some of the tips and tricks so that they can start their podcast with confidence. When I started my podcast in 2021, I knew nothing about podcasting. I just knew that I wanted to start one. I was so terrified to start. I actually bought one of this recorder and stared at it for like 10 months and didn't do anything about it. I just stared at it and I had no idea what to do or how to start. I was worried about what people were going to think. I was worried that my editing skills were going to be horrible. I was worried that I was going to hate my voice and that I didn't have the right equipment or the skills. But now today I have listeners from all over the world. I've produced, edited, published over 70 episodes by myself. I've had so many incredible guests on the podcast. I've been able to do such incredible collaborations. I've been able to monetize this podcast. I've met so many incredible people through this journey. And I feel like I've really found my favorite creative outlet for my voice, for expressing myself. And I was so terrified of editing, and I love editing. It's my favorite part. So I've learned so many tips and tricks along the way through trial and error. I've also spent a lot of money that I didn't need to spend. I've spent a lot of time that I didn't need to spend. I wanted to create this series for YouTube, which will go over all of the basics that you need to start your own podcast with confidence, with all the tools that you need. Today's first episode, I want to talk about the concept and the mindset, because that's where it all starts. And I'm going to give you a few tips and tricks for creating your concept and going through with it and starting the mindset work that it takes around this. And these are just a few to get you started. So let's start with the concept. I know for a fact that if you want to start your own podcast, there is something that you need to be sharing with the world. You have something to share. It's my true belief that we need as many voices in the podcasting space as possible. If you have a particular idea in mind, great, fantastic, let's go with that. If you don't, that's okay too. We're gonna get there. This video will help you gain clarity around what you're kind of thinking to do for your podcast, how you want it to feel for your audience, and what you want it to be. Some podcasts focus on one niche, and that's great, and one brand, while others really branch out and learn from all different walks of life. They have guests on from all different walks of life. They talk about a bunch of different topics. I'm a firm believer that you don't need a niche to be successful. My podcast was built on the foundation that you can have many, many, many interests, and they all fall under the umbrella of you and your interests. The Elevated Podcast is all about embracing your multifaceted qualities and interests and ideas and thoughts and beliefs, and to not put yourself in one box. With this video, take some time, sit down, and reflect on how you want your podcast to feel to your listener. Think about what you like as a listener of podcasts. Do you feel like something's missing from other podcasts? Are there things that are in other podcasts that you want to incorporate into yours? This is the fun part. This is when you get a little creative. This is when you get to listen to other podcasts and write down some things that you like in other podcasts, some things that you don't like that you think you could do a little bit better. And this will adapt and change as your podcast evolves. You can make a podcast about literally anything and everything. You will find the craziest podcasts out there. If you just go into this universe of men that have podcasts about nothing, you will see how many podcasts have been built on the foundation of absolutely nothing. So it is paramount that you understand that you do not need to have a niche. You don't even need to have a concept. You just need to kind of have somewhat of an idea of what you want to talk about and what you want to do. So look at your favorite podcasts or the most popular podcasts and what they do well. I feel like if you look at the main podcasts out there, Joe Rogan interviews people from all walks of life. The center of his brand is kind of like interviewing interesting people who have interesting stories. And that could be literally anything. You look at Call Her Daddy. Alex Cooper has built a brand centered around her and her self-growth now. Before it was just talking about sex, and those things can evolve over time. And if you feel like you need to have one niche and stay there, that's not true. You can evolve with it. Sometimes I feel like I put myself in a box. And I take a step back and realize that I don't need to be doing that, because the fact that you're interested in a topic is enough to get other people interested in your topics that you're covering. Your podcast could be chatting with your friends and being silly. Your podcast could be you becoming an expert in your field. Your podcast could be reacting to stuff that is in pop culture. Your podcast could be interviewing guests from all different walks of life or one particular niche. It can be a way to share your experience, your life advice that you feel like you should get out there to the world that the people need to hear. It can be about sharing your most controversial opinions. It can be all of those things. So listen to some of your favorite podcasts and ask yourself, does this podcast have one niche, or does this podcast cover a bunch of different topics? What do I like about this podcast, and what do I wish was a little different? Even if you think your idea has been done before, no one has done it in the way that you would be able to do it, because they are not you. I don't believe in oversaturation in social media anymore. Everything's oversaturated. But if you do things well and do things right and do things authentically, you will find the right people and the right audience to come to you. So to help you organize your concepts and your ideas for your podcast, I have partnered up with Notion for this video. Notion is a single place for you to write, plan, edit, execute. You can capture thoughts, manage projects, or even run an entire company using Notion and do it exactly the way you want it. It offers organizational tools, including task management, project tracking, to-do lists, bookmarking, and more. I use Notion when I was back in my master's program. I was working 3 part-time jobs, going to school, and doing my podcast. And it helps me so much organize everything. I used it to plan my content for my podcast and promote it on social media. I'm going to be talking about content calendars in another video. And I use these content calendars to kind of plan out my content and how I wanted it to look. So go check out the link in my description to try out Notion for free. Okay, with that being said, let's talk about mindset. Maybe you're nervous to start your first episode or even tell people that you want to start a podcast. Maybe you're nervous about putting out your 50th episode, because I definitely still run into this. What will people think if they listen? I hate my voice. What if my episode's bad? What if people hate it? Etc., etc. I still run into mindset roadblocks when I'm about to put out certain episodes that feel a little bit vulnerable for me. I have moments of being too self-critical or not, like if something's not perfect, etc., etc. And you know what I do? I put out the episode anyway. Sure, I let that fear kind of talk, but I don't let it run the show. So it's normal to feel fear, especially when you're starting something new and doing something that's scary and vulnerable and putting something out on the internet. But the people who are successful never let that fear win. Even if the fear is there, you still move forward anyways. I was so terrified to start the podcast because I was worried about my editing skills, speaking skills. I could come up with so many freaking reasons to not do it. But if I had let that fear win, I wouldn't be 2 years down the road, meeting so many incredible people, having such amazing guests on, such great conversations, being able to connect with people who felt similarly after they listened to my podcast. I felt less alone. I felt like I had a creative outlet for myself for when I was feeling down. I had an outlet. And if I let that fear win, I wouldn't have any of this now. Another tip I want to mention is that there will always be somebody out there who needs to hear what you have to say in exactly the way that you say it. Because you can say that there are so many people out there giving advice. Why would anyone want to hear from me? But maybe somebody out there still feels alone, even if there's so much information out there. And maybe they need to feel like they can resonate with somebody that feels like them. And maybe you are the person to connect them to feeling less alone. So there is somebody out there, hopefully more than one person, probably more than one person that needs to hear what you have to say. Another thing to keep in mind is that you have to start somewhere. You are never going to get 2 years down the road like me without starting somewhere. No one is going to pay that close attention to your first few episodes. Really, no one's going to listen to your first few episodes. Once you get to 100 episodes, no one's going to go back and listen to their first few episodes. And you are never going to learn what it takes to make really good content without doing it, without practicing. There's no school on how to create really good content and to learn from what makes your content good. Because you could look at Mr. Beast's videos, but you're never going to know how to do that stuff until you actually do it yourself. The first one is not going to be perfect. The 100th episode is not going to be perfect. Allowing yourself to put out stuff, even if it's not perfect. Again, this fear that what are people going to have to say? Or what if it's not perfect? You have to keep moving forward, even if there's that fear or this critique that things aren't perfect. You're never going to learn what it takes until you start doing it. It's always important to come back to your why. So that's why we're starting with concept. That's why we're starting with mindset. Because after listening to this video, I want you to write down, what is your why? Why do you want to start a podcast? Do you want it to be your creative outlet? Do you want to become an expert in your field? Do you want to have fun conversations with your friends? You always want to come back to your why. Write it down on a piece of paper, on a Post-it, keep it somewhere. That is your why. That's why you keep putting out episodes and why you don't let the fear win. Your why is what keeps you going. So this is your sign. If you were looking for a sign, to just start investigating what it takes to start a podcast, what you need, what equipment you might want to get, the tech, what your concept looks like, because building out that concept will get you really excited and make you want to start. Because there were so many tips and tricks that I wanted to share with podcast beginners, I created a downloadable masterclass on how to start your own podcast. I give you every single tip, everything. And I do mean everything. Every single tip I have from 2 years of podcasting full time so that you can save yourself time and hundreds of dollars figuring it out the hard way. I give you so many journaling prompts, advice, tips and tricks. There's 60 pages of this guide that address everything that you need to start your own podcast today. We talk about editing, we talk about monetization, we talk about reaching out to guests, creating your own intro and outro, and how to make your brand unique and vibrant and catchy, and everything that it takes to start your own podcast. If you're interested in starting your own podcast and having this guide help you along the way and giving you all the steps that you need without all the guessing work, the link will be in the description below to get your guide. I am so proud of you for having the courage to start your own podcast. It's scary, but you can do it, and your voice needs to be heard. The world needs to hear your voice and your perspective. Let me know in the comments below if there's anything in particular that you want me to address in this podcast series. If you have any questions about starting your own podcast, I'd love to answer your questions. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell so that you know when the next part of this series comes out, so that you can have all the tips, all of the tricks, all of the information that you need to start your podcast with confidence. I am so excited for you to start your own podcast. I feel like it's going to be amazing, and I can't wait to listen to it. And if you have started a podcast using my guide, using these videos, drop it in the comments below. Drop the link in the comments below so that I can go check it out and be one of your first listeners. And I hope this has helped. Let me know again in the comments below if you have any questions. And I hope you feel so elevated, and I will see you next time.